Hi everyone, welcome to the Old Town of Todos Santos, or at least the Old Town as it currently stands. I originally built this years ago, back in episodes number 2 and 3, but obviously a lot has changed since then in terms of the assets we have, the mods we have, and my vision of what the city's supposed to look like. And so I've identified 5 problems I'd like to fix with the Old Town. Number 1 is that the grid is too regular, so we need to introduce some variation to fix that. Number 2 is the matter of the buildings. Most of them aren't accurate compared to the inspiration, and there's too wide of a variety. So we're going to bring a more uniform and accurate style of architecture. Number 3 is that the courtyards are much too large and green, and the buildings are much too small. So we're going to make this place a lot denser. Number 4, we're missing a very important feature of the Casco Viejo, which is a Plaza de Armas, Plaza de Mayor, whatever you want to call it. And number 5, which is what we're going to start with, we have to get rid of this fantastic Ren Cathedral asset, unfortunately, because I don't know why I put this down. It doesn't fit the style, the time period, or anything like that whatsoever. So we have to get rid of that, and we're going to do something else in its place. Now, I had already done some half measures back in episode 40.1, but today we're going to go all the way. Now, I did leave a few buildings and details that I liked, but as you can see, most of this area is going to be completely filled in with new assets. So let's start by jumping over to our film studio, where we have a ready-built Plaza de Armas. You could go watch that in episode 50 if you would like to see it being built, but we're just going to take that and import it over here in the Old Town, and that's going to serve as our central plaza. It's also going to prompt our first adjustment to the road network, because I didn't feel like extending the plaza to make it a larger size to fit into our pre-existing block, so we're going to add another road running parallel to this one so that we have roads on either side of the plaza, which you would expect. And then we're going to take this other road and squeeze it in just a little bit, and it's going to lead to this one deviation in the road network. So with that first detail taken care of, it was time to put down a lot of buildings. So we're starting with a couple services, this lovely post office, and this Tropico police station, which spits out our custom Todos Santos police cars by Slyn, link in the description. I put a row of iconic and unique buildings along this main avenue where we already have a couple of nice looking theaters. I thought this would be a nice place to put some of the buildings that are going to stand out a little bit more. That's also true of the Plaza de Armas, so we have a new chapel along there. Additionally, there are also a couple smaller plazas adjacent to this one, just to really signify that this is the center of the Old Town. One of them has this really dense foliage, which is a style of park that I really started to like when I did one last week in the downtown remodel. As I was plopping buildings, I tried to adjust for a few of our issues, so changing the road network a bit here and there just to make some more irregular blocks, and adjusting many of these buildings to be a lot deeper, so we have these nice skinny buildings that go quite far back so that we fill up more of our blocks. Now, I have an imaginary law for the Old Town where new developments have to be in line with the traditional style of architecture, but there are a few developments that have slipped through the cracks with various loopholes, or were grandfathered in when these laws were enacted, and so there are a few more modern-looking developments. But other than 3 or 4 high-rises, they are for the most part in the Spanish colonial style. Of course, that itself has a wide range of buildings within it, but I used the assets that I had in my collection and just adjusting them here and there to fit the road network. And the result are blocks that look a little something like this. And this. And this. The final assortment of buildings isn't quite as cohesive as I would have liked to be in terms of their style, but I was looking at a few old towns like Cartagena in Colombia, and they can actually have quite a variety of buildings, so I'm not too worried about that. Now, unfortunately, we have to erase the sad outline of what was once Ren Cathedral, because it doesn't really look right as it is, and we're going to replace it with a park to remember it by. We are going to keep the general outline of the path that ran around it, but just supplement it a little bit so it looks like there's a loop that you could actually take a walk on, and enjoy all the foliage that we're going to add. But before we put down all the trees, I thought it would be an interesting challenge to have a weirdly shaped block on just this one corner of the park. We also have this nice marble banister that runs around the whole boundary of the park to cordon it off and make it look nice and fancy. Much like with that small plaza that we made before, we're going to do a dense arrangement of foliage here, using the live oak tree, the acai palms, the black frost tree, and a few others, until we get something that looks like this. And while we're here, might as well try to make this park somewhat functional. So I'm going to put down some of these entertainment service blocks in the vicinity of the park to try to draw people to this area. We're also going to do that in any of the other interesting public areas of the Old Town to try to draw as many people as we can to this part of the city because it's meant to be one of the main destinations in Todos Santos. Also, in the interest of functionality, we're going to add some of these Rico blocks to make our PO buildings functional. Again, much like we did with the downtown, I'm going for mixed zoning, so many of these buildings are going to have commercial on the bottom floor, and then above that is going to be residential. There's not really too much office space, but there is a little bit here and there. At first, I tried scaling the number of houses and jobs to each building, but that got really tedious and also wasted a lot of buildings. And as you may know, we're closing in on the building limit in this city. So I eventually decided to switch to the high density versions of both the commercial and the residential blocks, and just estimating about how many people would live and work in each city block instead of going building by building. And that way I saved a lot of time and a lot of buildings as well. And I used all the time that I saved to detail. So we have things like a restaurant patio here in the middle of this block. Lots and lots of parking fit into all the nooks and crannies that you get when you have buildings arranged like this. And probably the most time-consuming and challenging part of detailing, I wanted to have a bunch of stuff on top of all these rooftop verandas. So we have some swimming pools, some greenhouses, solar panels on a few of the larger buildings, a couple of restaurant and bed and breakfast type places where you could imagine there would be breakfast served on the patio. And my favorite to decorate were probably these little private balconies. Some of them ended up looking a little bit more pleasant than others, and some of them just kind of seemed downright lonely. Regardless of how they ended up, there were a lot of them, and this got to be pretty boring, so I'm just going to skip through most of it. And we're going to decorate the tallest tower in the Old Town. This is one of those that found a loophole in the new law and was able to build a modern-ish skyscraper in the Old Town. And because it's so tall, I thought it would be a good place to put a little communications tower. Now the last couple details are a little bit more straightforward. So we have this cute little utility pole, which we're going to run across the rooftops of the Old Town. I did this for just about every single road, so there's a big web of these things running all across the Old Town. Obviously, we don't have enough time for all that footage in this video, so you can see the full time-lapse linked in the description if you would like to watch that. Last thing is just to quickly update some details. So Node Controller didn't exist when I originally made the Old Town, so I wanted to sharpen the corners on all of these intersections. One, because I think it looks a little bit more realistic and old-fashioned. And two, because it makes it a lot easier to fit in all these decals that I had. And speaking of those, I had to go through and fix those on all these new roads and road alterations that we made during this build. I also updated the one-way and do not enter signs accordingly. That's it for this remodel of the Old Town. I really hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to see you on the next episode of Todos Santos. See ya!